The recent protest by wrestlers in India has brought significant attention to the pervasive issue of sexual abuse in sports across the country. Wrestlers, predominantly women, have taken to the streets, demanding justice and an end to the rampant sexual abuse they have endured within the sports community. This powerful movement has shed light on the long-standing problem that has often been ignored or overlooked. Numerous cases of sexual abuse have emerged, with victims sharing their traumatic experiences and exposing the dark underbelly of the sports industry. These brave wrestlers have shared stories of exploitation, harassment, and assault by coaches, trainers, and officials. Their testimonies paint a distressing picture of a system that failed to protect them and allowed perpetrators to go unpunished. One significant figure who has come under scrutiny in this context is Brij Bhushan, a renowned wrestling coach and a prominent figure in Indian wrestling. Bhushan, who was once highly regarded for his contributions to the sport, now faces allegations of sexual misconduct and abuse by several wrestlers. These allegations have raised serious questions about the credibility of the sports administration and the measures taken to safeguard the well-being of athletes. The role of Brij Bhushan has come into focus due to his influence and position within the wrestling community. Wrestlers have accused him of exploiting his power and authority to prey on vulnerable athletes, using his position to manipulate and control them. The allegations against Brij Bhushan have further fueled the determination of the protesting wrestlers to seek justice and hold those responsible accountable for their actions. The protests led by the wrestlers have successfully drawn attention to the urgent need for systemic reforms in Indian sports. The demands include the establishment of a transparent and independent inquiry into cases of sexual abuse, the implementation of stringent policies to prevent and address such incidents, and the creation of support systems for survivors to come forward without fear of reprisal. The wrestlers' protest has served as a wake-up call for the sports authorities, compelling them to acknowledge the severity of the issue and take immediate action. It has ignited a broader conversation about sexual abuse in sports and raised awareness among the general public, fostering a collective responsibility to protect athletes from such exploitation. The wrestlers' protest against sexual abuse in sports in India has not only shed light on the widespread problem but has also exposed the hypocritical stance of the government towards this issue. While the government claims to prioritize the welfare of athletes and the development of sports, its response to the allegations and demands put forth by the protesting wrestlers has been questionable at best. Despite the gravity of the allegations and the sheer number of victims coming forward, the government initially downplayed the issue, attempting to sweep it under the rug. The lack of a swift and decisive response from the authorities has only fueled the frustration and anger of the wrestling community and their supporters. One of the most glaring examples of the government's hypocritical approach is its contradictory messaging. On one hand, politicians and officials express sympathy for the victims and promise action, but on the other hand, they fail to back up their words with concrete measures. This stark contrast between rhetoric and action raises doubts about the government's sincerity in addressing the issue of sexual abuse in sports. Another aspect that highlights the government's hypocritical stance is its emphasis on sports as a symbol of national pride and achievement. Indian athletes have achieved remarkable success on the international stage, and the government often glorifies their accomplishments for political gain. However, when it comes to protecting the dignity and well-being of these very athletes, the government's response has been lackluster. Furthermore, the government's role in appointing and supporting individuals like Brij Bhushan, who now face serious allegations of sexual abuse, cannot be ignored. It raises questions about the due diligence and accountability exercised in the selection and monitoring of coaches and officials within the sports administration. The government's failure to prevent the rise of individuals with questionable backgrounds in positions of power undermines its claims of championing athletes' rights and safety. The government's handling of the wrestlers' protest also highlights the existing power dynamics within the sports industry. The reluctance to take decisive action against influential figures implicated in sexual abuse cases sends a message that power and reputation are prioritized over justice and the well-being of athletes. This further perpetuates a culture of silence and impunity, making it increasingly difficult for victims to come forward and seek justice. Moreover, the government's response to the wrestlers' demands for systemic reforms has been sluggish. While token measures such as committees and inquiries have been announced, their effectiveness and independence remain questionable. The wrestlers and their supporters argue that true reform requires a comprehensive overhaul of the existing structures, including strict implementation of guidelines, mandatory background checks for coaches and officials, and the establishment of a dedicated support system for survivors of sexual abuse. In conclusion, the wrestlers' protest has exposed the hypocritical approach of the government towards the issue of sexual abuse in sports in India. The lack of a prompt and resolute response, contradictory messaging, and failure to address systemic issues highlight the need for genuine commitment and action to protect athletes and eradicate sexual abuse from the sports industry. Only through sincere efforts, transparency, and accountability can the government regain the trust of the wrestling community and fulfill its responsibility of ensuring a safe and nurturing environment for athletes. As the wrestlers continue their struggle for justice and accountability, it is crucial for society as a whole to rally behind them. By addressing the deep-rooted issues of sexual abuse in sports and holding perpetrators accountable, we can create a safer and more inclusive environment for athletes in India, where their talents can thrive without the shadow of exploitation and abuse.